What's your I told you so moment? Since I was 14. My throat got itchy when I ate apples. I told my mom, but she thought I just didn't want to eat apples and forced me to eat them. Went to the doctor's office and got a test for allergies. Turns out, I'm allergic to apples, peaches, and many other fruits. My sister and I were out sledding when we were kids at this place with a really steep hill. I had, unknowingly, gone down a sled path that had a jump in it, and when I landed it really hurt my back. So when I got back up to the top of the hill, I told my sister, "Don't go that way. The jump really hurts." She called me a baby and didn't believe me that it really hurt, so she decided she would go down that path on her sled. Well, she hit the jump and didn't get back up. Turns out she fell so hard she had broken her leg. When we finally got her back up the hill into the car, I got to tell her, "I told you so." I work at a U.S. Navy shipyard. My worst "I told you so" moment was when a submarine had multiple issues with sanitation, collection tanks, and the piping that led from the showers and toilets to the sanitation, collection tanks. Documented and pointed out the same problems over a 12-week period. Supervisors and the tank area manager didn't give a damn and pointedly ignored my reports. Undocking day was approaching and the captain of the sub wanted the boat out on time. So they moved up the tank closure schedule. So tank closing protocol requires several sign-offs. One from a qualified civilian inspector, one from a qualified Navy hull technician sailor, and one from a qualified Navy engineering officer. That tank in question failed all 3 concurrent inspections. Undocking got pushed back by 30 days until all problems found were corrected. Daily operations estimated costs were north of $10,000 per day. Factor in the mandatory overtime and rework required, and we were looking at maybe triple the daily cost. This is just people's pay. I didn't get to see the material cost overrun, but I know for a fact that a lot of the materials got shipped in or fabricated in-house overnight. Needless to say, a lot of people on general schedule pay got chewed out by the then shipyard CO in private. Anytime I'm asked to give an expected time to deliver on a project, give an honest assessment, and then told that estimate seems too large and the bosses give a much shorter time frame. My original estimation is nearly always the more accurate of the two. Why ask questions you don't want to know the answer to anyway? My best friend started dating my ex-wife 10 years after the divorce, and he checked if I'd take issue even though he didn't need to. Anyway, when we divorced, it was because she was cheating on me while I was in Afghanistan. He goes out of state for work and told me she started acting off, not answering calls, quick to hang up, starting fights when he's home or going to parties rather than spend time with him. I pointed out this is what she did to me almost exactly, and stated that if he confronts her on her shit, she will probably, without provocation, accuse him of cheating, and more to the point, most likely because she is actively cheating. Q30. Minute monologue of how she's grown up and she's not that person now, she's just used to not having to answer to others or having a real relationship in year. 3 hours later he calls because he went to pick up some weed and there she is blowing the cellar. In high school I was at a party where everyone was getting drunk. I had come with 2 friends, and near the end of the night this one guy there was losing everyone into his van to get late night food. He swore he was not drunk and there were so many people in his car, including the 2 people I came with. It was not a battle I was going to win, but it seemed like an obviously dumb situation. Bunch of underage kids packed into a van driving around in the suburbs at 1 o'clock in the morning. I told my friends that this wasn't a good idea and they need to get out of the van and come back gone with me. My house was within walking distance. They acted like I was a party pooper for a sec, but then they got out. Next day I find out the guy driving ran a red light and got T-boned by a truck. The one kid in the back almost died and everyone got banged up. The friends I pulled out of the van were in the backseat along with Hit. Not saying I saved their lives, but I really may have saved their lives. Once owned a dog who was very stubborn and independent. She lived a feral life in the mountains as a young pup, and I feel like that played a role. She felt more like a roommate than a pet. She was having heart trouble when she got older, so she had to get a chest scan at the vet. These two men came out to get Het, so I gave Thera a heads up that she would absolutely dislike being flipped on her back end. Held there for the scan. Flipping a dog on its back is putting it in a pretty submissive position. One of the guys interrupted me and basically said they were professionals and I had to just let them work. They snapped a muzzle on her and took her to the back. A few seconds pass. Then I hear a crash and a few yells. One of the guys who took her comes out and sheepishly asks for my help. It turns out as soon as they flipped her on her back, she kicked out of their arms, unclipped her muzzle, removed it with her front paws, then made a mad dash for Freedorn. I caught her roaming around the back of the vet's office and she was perfectly well behaved while I held her for the scan. I felt bad for two guys she escaped from, but I had tried to warn them. Someone started talking about a bottle of Newman's Own salad dressing while at dinner with my family, and I said something like, "I'm pretty sure that was started by the actor, race car driver Paul Newman," to which one of my siblings replied, "No, it was someone else." I grabbed the bottle and turned it around and started reading the label out loud. The first sentence was Paul Newman's career was acting, but his passion was auto racing. I stopped reading after that. This dumb asshole woman wouldn't leave the llamas at our petting zoo alone, even after I warned her. Eventually they had enough and spit all over her. Green goopy spit from head to torso. She threw up a bunch and I laughed until I smelled it, and then I was retching too. I've talked about this cheating scandal at my high school before. Something I never mentioned was my friend was about to ask for the answers to a test that he really needed. Told him not to do it. Wasn't worth an all. Thankfully, he didn't do it. When the whole scandal came out, 3 kids got expelled, 8 suspended. I know a dozen more were caught, but I don't know what happened to them. My friend's teacher ended up giving him and a few other kids an A just for being honest apparently. He was one of the few kids in that class that didn't cheat. This is more of a, I told myself so, but anyway. When I applied to medical school, one of the application essays had a prompt that asked us what we would do if we did not get into medical school. I thought I would take a risk since it was a reach school and I wanted to stand out. I kept thinking it wasn't worth it and that I should just write a normal essay. But for some reason just went with the riskier option. I wrote that I would go to law school and become a lawyer specializing in prosecuting medical malpractice. I ended up getting an interview and had a good laugh about it with one of the interviewers. Did not get into that medical school. I was a fresh-faced sysadmin, a PFY if you will, who had just been handed my first big project. I took it over after it was already in progress due to the lead admin having a medical emergency. It was a critical environment, and the key component was a 2-node database cluster. I was in way over my head, but I had support from a few project members, and so I was making my way through it. At one point I was reviewing the connectivity to the servers. The idea for a critical piece of infrastructure is to reduce single points of failure. SPOF. As I was going through the documentation, I noticed both database servers had all of their network connections run to the same switch. So I brought it up to the network guy on the team, a senior engineer. He said not to worry about it and brushed me off. So I brought it up on the next project call. I said, if we're trying to keep this thing up and running according to the SLA, we really need to eliminate this issue and put half the connections for both systems to another switch. Senior network guy said I was wrong. Switches are very reliable and rarely fail. Like I said, this was my first project, so I relented. The systems went live into production use the next week, literally within 5 days of the systems being live and customer facing. The fucking switch dies. Both nodes of the cluster go offline. The database is down. The app is down. Huge cost to the business unit customer. The outage review call was pretty fun. As the admin, I was asked why the systems were connected to the same switch. I said I had called that out as a risk, and the network guy said it was no problem and I was overruled. 'Twas awesome when the call leader asked the network guy if he still felt that way. Helping a former friend do some renovations in a house he had just purchased. I had better than half a clue what I was doing, and my other friend who was with us definitely knew what she was doing. But the guy who owned the house hardly knew which end of the hammer to grip. We get down to the foundation walls and there is an almost brand new 4x4 post running from floor to ceiling that he thought was ugly. I tried to explain to him that it was clearly load bearing, and my friend chimed in that it was obviously there for a reason. But his reply was something to the effect of girls being hysterical and mocking us for thinking the ceiling was going to fall down. I literally backed away from the situation, and when he took a maul to the burn and knocked it loose, I watched the ceiling drop. He still thought I was overreacting until we got upstairs and saw the 3 inches gap between the floor and baseboards along the front wall of the house. The bed frame wasn't properly lashed down while moving. Partner insisted the weight of the frame would keep it in place. Flew into the middle of a major intersection on a left turn. We dodged 4 lanes of oncoming traffic to collect the pieces. I fixed my partner with a look that could peel paint. And he said, I know. You told me so and you're right. I'm sorry. I still give him shit for it every time we move something. It's funny now, but goddamn was I pissed at the time. I told my mom, who is a nurse, that I am sick, and she said I was lying. After 2 months and a lot of blood coughed up, she took me to the doctor. I had pneumonia and a double ear infection. I also had a bunch other issues that I can't really remember. I had to take 7 medications and have to use a nebulizer daily. That was the biggest I told you so moment I ever had.